Hello, I'm Sandra O'Connell. I've been teaching technology classes for the Reston Community Center for nearly 20 years. Today's class, Protect Your Privacy and Identity Online, has come about because cybercrime is now a multi-trillion-dollar business and growing. So if we want to keep using computers, then we need to know how to protect ourselves. And I suggest for more information about our classes, you can go to restoncommunitycenter.com for our catalog. So let's get started. The goals today are threefold. One, to help you assess and manage your risk. Two, know how to respond when your information has been compromised. And three, to develop safe online habits. You may want to grab a notebook and take some notes because I'm going to give you some really good tips. Well, how do you go about reducing your risk and why? Well, you cannot eliminate 100% of the threat. We have to realize that it's a reduction of risk. There's no such thing as 100% protection. And all of the security experts advise that you assume that your data has been compromised. And as a consequence, we all need to develop habits, safe habits, when we are online. Well, how could you be at risk? Well, let's look at just some of the things we do on a normal basis. These are just a few. Most people have a smartphone. Many are doing texting on a regular basis, of course, email, internet, using Netflix or any of those streaming shows. All of the things we do online are ways in which our data might be compromised. That doesn't mean you should stop doing them. It means you should be developing safe habits. Well, the first step you should take is this. Find out whether or not your data has been breached. And the word that's used is pawned, but it's pwned.com. Now, in order to find out whether your data has been breached in some way, and there have been so many hacks along the way with the government and Aetna and others, that you want to enter an email address to see if the hackers have compromised it. So you enter your email address, you go to www.haveibeenpwned.com, put it in, and see, and it'll show you when your data was taken, in what breach it was, and what data. Understand, just because something didn't happen right away, that it doesn't mean that you're safe, because sometimes the hackers will sit on millions of these records for a couple of years and then come back and use them. So you want to make sure you're developing vigilant habits whenever you're on the computer. When you put your address in, what happens is you get a response, and of course I put mine in, and sure enough, oh no, you've been pawned. Well, what's the importance of knowing when it's done? Well, it helps because of a couple of things. It'll tell you the source. I didn't have it on here, but it'll show you where it came from, and it shows you what data was taken. And so this one says email addresses, names, phone numbers, social media profiles. This one says compromised data. The data was taken in this particular hack was from email addresses or passwords. And what that means is these records, by the millions, are out here in what's called the dark web. They are bought and sold. And there are people all over the world sitting on these records. Well, what good does it tell you to know that they were stolen? Well, this. Because now what? You've been pawned. Now what? Here's some steps to take if you show up, and I really recommend everybody check this. You can run a virus scan on your computer. You can change or strengthen your passwords, and I'll show you more about that in a minute. You want to create an extra email address to use just for subscriptions and shopping, so it's not mixed in with your regular mail. You want to check your financial accounts, and where possible, you want to use two-factor identification. What that means is, in addition to your passwords, they usually send you something back, usually a text message of some kind or a number that you then have to put in. And those are all actions that you should take regardless, but especially if you've been pawned. Second step is to use strong passwords. Now, we've all heard these lessons for years, and we've all got pages of these passwords, and they're hard to remember and difficult. Well, it turns out a couple years ago that they figured out through some research that that process wasn't working very well. Even the guy who wrote the rules admits that they weren't working very well. And so they have changed them, but there's some new rules that came about a couple years ago. The primary rule is this: longer is better. We're all used to, it said 8, it had to be a minimum of 8 with upper and lower and numbers and characters. So what they're recommending now is you use words that are with no spaces and 16 to 20 characters. So my first Chevy 1972 Impala, something I can remember, but it's long, and that's the primary criterion that we have to follow. You don't want to use any identifying information. And what's really important here is to use different passwords for each account that has any financial or personal information on it. Don't use the same. I have found people using the same password for perhaps a bank account and an investment account. Not a good idea. So you want to also use separate passwords for each email account. If you have several screen names, then you want to use separate accounts, and you want to use separate passwords for those, because if one is pawned or stolen in some way, you have another account that's safe. Of course, whenever you see anything suspicious, it's fine to just change the password. And a thing that's recommended now is you can use a password manager. There are any number of them. They range from $25 to $60, $70, and they can collect all of them and keep track of them for you on your computer, and then that account has a master password that you can keep. Now, step 3, and this is another basic in protecting privacy, and that's to keep your operating systems on all of your devices up to date. The challenge today is most of us have more than one device. We may have an Android phone and an Apple iPad or a Mac computer and a PC. So there are different operating systems. So the primary ones are Apple, which right now is at this point is still iOS 13, soon to be 14. This is the symbol for the Android, and then Windows 10. So what is an operating system? Just basically it's the set of directions that runs and manages your computer. And it's the set of directions that has the security in it for your computer. That's why it's essential that you keep it up to date. How do you do it? For the Apple operating system, you can go to www.apple.com. There's a support tab there. Click on that and just say software update, and it will give you directions. iOS 14 is expected in late September of 2020. We recommend you wait probably a month or 6 weeks just so any initial bugs are worked out, but then you'll be safe to go ahead and do an install. This is the symbol for the Android system. Android is different. It's called open source software, whereas Apple is closed. So there are many versions of it. So depending on what phone you have, whether it's a Samsung or a Sony, it may have some different version or flavor, if you will. So it's really difficult to tell any one person how to upgrade. So what you want to do to get directions is go to 2 of my favorite websites, howtogeek.com or wikihow.com. Put in your phone and the number, because you want to make sure you've got the right version, and you will find directions for upgrading. Or go to the website for the owner of the phone. That is, if it's Toshiba or Sony, go to their website and they should have directions. Updating Windows. For all of us who have Windows computers, just remember that Windows 7 is no longer supported, which means it's not secure. And the hackers know this, so it's really dangerous for you to leave that on your computer. The current version of Windows 10 was released at least at the point of this taping, is from May 2020, but about every 6 months, Microsoft updates. Now, that usually happens automatically on the PC. It's set up to just roll and do that. And if you want to check for the current version, you go to the Start button here, and you click on this little gear icon, which is this one right here, and when it comes up, you'll see a list of places, and what you do is you open this, Update and Security, and in that it'll have a list, and it'll show you what whether you're current or not, or how to update. So once you're updated, what else do you need to do? Well, there's a lot of things you need to do. Here's one that I strongly recommend, and all the security experts recommend, which is to freeze your credit. It used to be difficult to freeze your credit in that they charged you, some made it difficult, some wouldn't do it, some of the three. But now what we have is a law that came in 2018 that requires them to let you freeze your credit free of charge. So what does it mean? Well, it means this. No information can be released without your permission. Once you put a freeze on your credit, then if a hacker who's gotten some of your information tries to open a credit card in your name, that has to be referred to you before they release any information. So it really prevents one of the major forms of credit card for fraud, which is releasing new cards. So you want to freeze credit of minor children. As you may know, at the age of 1, children need to have a Social Security number, and you need one in order for them to be claimed as an exemption. So what happens now is it's a growing form of fraud because those records are just lying there. Nobody's getting bills. You're not checking it. You have no way of checking that there's fraud. So it's a good idea to freeze the credit of minor children until they're going to be using it, until they're at work or some other reason. You have to go to each credit bureau separately. They don't share in the sense of you freeze at Equifax and they'll tell the other ones. No. You have to go separately to each one. They're all required to have websites and to make it fairly easy and transparent. Or you can call them if you feel that's better. Then you say, well, wait a minute, what if I need to buy a new car, or what if I downsize and I get it going through a bank loan? Well, there's easy ways to take care of that. It's called a thaw. So either online or on the phone, you can thaw your credit. So for the time period that you're working through any kind of loan process, and then you call them back and they can refreeze it. So you can do it temporarily, or you can just unthaw it permanently if that's what suits your interest. This is an easy step, takes a little time, but it's really one of the strongest things you can do. Well, step 5, okay. Step 5 is the one that's the most complex, will take the most time and patience to do because it's not as easy as some other things. Step 5 means that you have to manage the settings in all of your devices. So computers, tablets, phones, the streaming devices that you may have on your television to watch movies, all of that, they all have settings for privacy and security. It's just they make it a little hard for you to find. What happens is this, your information on what you're doing is repackaged and sold. That is, yes, they are tracking. They're tracking what shows you watch. They're tracking what websites you're on. They're tracking what you buy. So you need to try and control that to the degree that you can. Many of the apps that you download, particularly onto a phone, are going to ask you for access. Can I have access to your location, to your contacts? So you always want to watch what the apps are asking for. Unfortunately, the default setting, meaning what your device comes with, is to opt in to sharing. So, of course, Facebook or Microsoft, they want your information. So they are going to assume that it's okay unless you tell them differently. And that's the job. So the burden is pretty much on the consumer to opt out and say, no, don't share my email. No, don't share my contacts. So the question is, how do I find all that stuff? Well, it's quite a search. Here's some of the data that they're actually collecting, which surprises most people. your contacts, your photos, your buying habits, the shows you've viewed, sites you've browsed, and particularly your location. Because location, where you are, that information is then combined with other public information, such as zip code and where the economic status of a particular zip code, and that can be combined to then target information and ads to you. Well, it's frustrating for most people, but what it comes down to is understanding one basic premise. Folks, the internet is a business. Yes, it's free, and we've all gotten quite attached to doing all these things for free, email and shopping and photos and making reservations and all of that. We all wanted it because it's free. Well, it's not free. The technology enables the companies to track and collect your private information. And your data is then combined with other data, as I just mentioned. It's packaged and then resold. And most of these companies make major revenue from their reselling of data. And marketers then use it to target ads and products for you. So what it comes down to is what? We're willing to give up some of our personal information, our personal data, for convenience and access to services. Now, 20 years ago when I first started teaching, it really wasn't that big of a deal. But now it's a major issue, and there's a growing concern over how data is being used, how it's being packaged, and who's getting it. So it comes down to you need to learn how to manage the settings for privacy on all of your devices. And you do that by going to settings. On Apple products, this is what it looks like, is this kind of a little gear device or some variation, and then this is the one, or again, variations of it for Android devices. And what happens is you have to go into settings. There's usually several steps. It may vary a little depending on what you're using, but you'll have to scroll down on your phone or tablet, go to privacy, and then it's going to show you all the things that might be accessed. And then it say here, contacts. So I say, no, I don't want you to access my contacts. So I can go over here to set, all right? And then I go and put the slider on or off. The green means it's on. So this is the general process that you want to follow. Now I'm going to show you how to do it in Apple. I'm going to show you how to control your privacy settings in an Apple product. This happens to be the Apple iPad mini, but the process is the same whether you're using another tablet or your phone. It may look a little different, so you may have to scroll around a bit. But the process always starts with going to settings first. So you look for the icon for settings, which is right here. I'm going to tap that. And up comes the menu of everything that's hidden behind settings. So to get to privacy, I have to do the equivalent of scrolling. I'm going to pull this up and keep pulling up, which allows me to scroll until I get to privacy, which is right here. So now I'm going to tap on privacy, and another menu comes up on this side, which is location services. And this is where the device has all of the information about location. Now, location means every device has a little electronic signal in it. That's how they find you. So if you want it on or off, you can go through each of these. So for example, under location services, I have mine on. You can turn it off altogether, but that also means you can't use it for a map or say to find the nearest gas station because it needs to know where you are when it's looking for those things. So notice though, I'm going to come down and tap on contacts. And on contacts, it says, oh, Google Maps may ask for contacts, and it will let me know that under here. So I can go back, and do I want it to do those things? Let's say photos. Well, here's a couple that have asked for access to my information. One's called a puzzle one, and over here, this is Chrome. So I don't want it, so I can say never. But you can also tap on the arrow and you can put never, or you can allow it to do something else. So sometimes you can go back, and if I go to location services, here's another app that I have called All Trails, which is what I use when hiking. But would you want it on for then? Of course. So I can get lost rather easily. So you want to go to All Trails. And what happens in most apps is you'll kind of come up with these choices. Do you want it to never know where you are? Just ask the next time. But here's the one of choice, only while using the app. So you have choices in here, or always means it's always on. For example, Gas Buddy, which is an app that lets you find the nearest gas station. You might want that on all the time. So you can check which one you want. And to get back, you just go up to the top, and there's an arrow facing this way, and that moves me back one each time. So those are the steps to controlling your location and a lot of your privacy. Most apps that ask for your location, frankly, don't need it. There are a few that do, as we said, if you're looking for a restaurant or maps or directions, but others do not, and you primarily want to have those off. Now I'm going to talk about how to go into the privacy and location settings for Android products. That's most likely your phone, although it could be a Sony tablet. What you want to do is look for the gear wheel icon. You go to the Android, look for the gear wheel icon, and then it'll say app permissions, and you want to look for that. You may have to do some scrolling and searching, and then you want to select which ones you want to give your permission to, like a map, and then you may disable it or enable it. If you're having any difficulty, here's an easy solution. If you just put in support.google.com and then put in ask for directions for the name of your device, you'll usually find them. Now, a third place that you want to go for settings is Google Chrome. Now, Google Chrome is the most commonly used browser when people are doing internet searches. So when you're doing a search, Google is gathering a lot of information. It's how they make all that money. And they are compiling it based on your movements over the internet and what you look at. You've probably noticed that if you search on something, you will very quickly get 3 or 4 samples or ads relating to that topic. The easiest thing that I can tell you to do, because it is a number of steps, is to go to, again, support.google.com, and you want to ask for directions, and this is what comes up, and it says, how can we help you when you get to support? And I typed in privacy, and this is what will come up, and then you hit enter, and it'll come up with all the directions. So I think that'll be easier to do. Just remember, go to support.google.com. All right, that will take a lot of time. You want to set aside time to do your browser settings and your privacy settings in your devices. Now, I want to move on to another step, which is to use a browser that doesn't track. Google is going to, and Bing are both going to be looking for what you're doing. They're tracking every place you have been and compiling that information. There are ways around that, however. In Google, you can go to something called incognito, so that Google is not tracking you. To get there, you have to go to the main menu, and then there's 3 little dots you have to look for. And if you click on those or tap, depending, then a menu will come up, and you just come down and say new incognito menu, and it looks like this. And so that means Google is not tracking you. It doesn't mean you will never get ads from Google, but it will certainly reduce it. Other options are a browser called DuckDuckGo.com you can download that also doesn't track, and there are a few others, Opera, and there's Komodo Dragon. Step 7 is what I call limit your electronic footprint. All these places that we are on our phone, paying bills online, ordering goods and having things delivered, watching television shows, all of them are tracking our information. So here's a couple of shortcut things you can do to reduce the number of ways that your information might be hacked. most of the utilities and many other companies are going to ask you if they can pull the bill to pay from your account. And they'll say, oh, just set it up and we will automatically do it. You don't have to worry about the payments. I strongly recommend, as do other people, that you not do that. Rather, you set it up so that you're paying it from your bank. So let's say you've got the water company, the power company, the gas company all pulling from your bank account. If any one of them is hacked, here we are with 3 possibilities of databases that could be hacked. Now, they all take protections, but it's possible. Instead, if you're paying the bills from your account, it's your bank. Can that happen? Possible, but not that likely. So that's a way in which you reduce the risk. So if you've done any of those things, do it the other way so that you're in control of the payment. Many of them will let you set up a flat payment monthly anyway, so it becomes very easy. I've been doing it ever since they created internet banking, never had a problem. Another way to cut down on your information availability is to enter the credit card number when you shop online. Most of these shops where you go are going to say, oh, wouldn't you like to leave your credit card number? It's a convenience for you and we do all this security. Yes, they do. They encrypt, but it's another place where you have your information. So this is a trade-off between convenience and risk, a decision everybody has to make. I have opted with Amazon Prime not to do that, in that I leave the credit card there, but every other site I have changed it. So you can control where your credit card information is. Again, they encrypt, but they could be hacked. Another recommendation is to limit the number of cards you use. Most experts now recommend that you use only 2 credit cards at most and 1 debit card. Many people have more than that in their wallet. It's just another place where you're leaving electronic tracks, whether you're using the card or not. It can be hacked. So close some of those accounts and pick the 2 cards you're going to use. And never use your debit card to pay a bill online. That's a much riskier thing to do. You want to be careful about public Wi-Fi. If you're in a cafe somewhere or a hotel, you don't really know how good their security is. So if you want to just look up a set of directions, that's one thing. But other than that, you want to be very careful and don't ever order anything or use credit card information or banking information in a public space. Of course, be careful of what you share on social media. The hackers are trolling those sites, Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest. It's trolling them to gather information. Oh, I'm going to Hawaii for a 2-week vacation. Yes, come rob my house. So you want to be very careful because that information can then be put together with other databases. One of the ways they gather information, some of these sites, is by fun surveys. Are you smarter than a 5th grader? Can you name 50 presidents? Don't respond to those. They're just ways of gathering data. And of course, as I've just done, to go in and take the time, set the privacy and location controls. The last step is don't fall for scams. There are so many out there. How do you avoid them? And as soon as one is exposed, then another one comes up. So one way to do that is to think about your actions and not click as quickly as we're used to doing. Hackers thrive during any time of uncertainty or unrest. Whenever there's a disaster of any kind, yes, the Red Cross and legitimate places are asking for money, but so are a lot of other people that are not legitimate. So they use our anxieties and fear. Anytime you read something that's playing on fear in any way, it's a scam. So you want to make sure that you don't open any attachments unless you know for sure who sent it. It's a way in which they attach little pieces of software that then get into your computer and can look around and track and grab information. You want to be careful about what are called impersonators or look-alike URLs. URL is another term for the address line. So when you see the address line on top, so it might say Wells Fargo, but it might be spelled F-A-R-G-A instead of O. There'll be and who would catch that? You know, if you bank with them, you don't look at it, but that's what happens. Another thing to look for in the address line is this. When the first part turns to HTTPS, that means it's now secure and they have added a layer of encryption. And you always, whenever you're doing any transaction that involves your information and money, want to make sure that you're on a site that has the S at the end. Of course, you don't reveal personal information when anybody asks for it unless you know for sure where it's going. Most importantly, just don't fall for scare tactics. Your grandchild, your brother is on a trip and has run out of money and desperately needs $300. So don't fall for any of those. If you think that's possible, then don't respond and call the person and find out. Here's a good one, something my mother taught me. If it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And there is a website, looks-too-good-to-be-true.com, that you can go to check out what's the latest scam. Perhaps you do have $50,000 in Nairobi. Unlikely. All right. We realize the government does not call you. There are a lot of scams where both IRS, Social Security calling, and again, making threatening statements. That is, you owe money or your account's been breached. The government doesn't call. That's not how it works. And the bottom line on this, I think, is to only share personal information, identifying information, financial information, when you've initiated the transaction. So rather than worry about is this a scam or not, just let your radar go up and go, wait a minute, red flag. And if you think it's something that needs to be done, then you get off the computer, either call the place or you go into the website that you know is the correct website in order to check the information. So that's the primary way that you can protect yourself, is to stay in control and only respond if you initiated the transaction. You want to be in control. In summary, here are the 8 steps that we have covered, all actions that you can take. Find out if your information is on the dark web. Check that website to see if you've been pawned, and then take corrective actions. Create strong passwords using the new rules. Upgrade your operating system, but you have to do it on all of your devices. Go in and freeze your credit. Take the time to go in and manage your privacy and location settings on your phone, your tablet, and your computer. If you like, use a browser that doesn't track. And limit your electronic footprint by controlling your credit cards and controlling your banking information. And last, don't fall for scams, and the easiest way not to fall for a scam is simply you stay in control and initiate the transaction. Hope this has been a worthwhile time for you, and that you now have a good to-do list to reduce your risk. Thanks to the Reston Community Center for sponsoring this program.